Hello and welcome to the Celtic Huddle podcast. I'm Mark Wilson and today I'm joined by Murdo MacLeod. We're also joined by former Celtic star HARALD BRATTBAKK, the man who scored a goal on the title-winning day in 1998 to stop 10 in a row. Derek McGregor from the Scottish Sun will also be joining us as he's been close to all the major stories at Parkhead this season. So, on today's podcast, we'll look ahead to Celtic's final two league games of the season, at home to St Johnstone and away to Hibs. We'll get Harold's take on his fellow countryman Christopher Ajer and what he thinks about the player's next move. We'll also have exclusive transfer news on Odsonne Edouard, and we'll look at the results of our poll question and we'll discuss them. And we'll bring you the latest on the hunt for a new manager. Will Eddie Howe be paraded next week as the new gaffer? So stay with us for the next 45 minutes. And once again, also get your comments in and questions into us all. We'll read out as many as we can. We want to hear from you, the Celtic fans. And I'm delighted to say once again, the podcast is now sponsored by First Star Legends Gin, First Class Transfers and Social Recluse. We thank them all for their support. Also follow us on Twitter at Huddle Celtic and on Instagram, the Celtic Huddle Podcast. So let's get right into it. Introduce our first guest, HARALD BRATTBAKK, a Celtic hero, scored one of the goals on that memorable day back in 1998. Harold, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and we've got your old assistant manager here with us, Murdo MacLeod. Good to see Harold again, is it?
Fantastic. He just looks the same.
I was just about to say,
years ago,
Harold looks like he could still play at the minute. He's kept his youthful looks, but Harold, how are you?
You don't want to see me on the pitch now. You don't want to.
And Harold, just before we get into it, I mean, I was chatting to Murdo just about you before we come on, but for any young footballers who want a career change, you've certainly had a huge career change. And what you're taking up. How on earth did you get to be an airline pilot quickly?
No, it was, I decided when I was hanging up my boots, I was thinking I need to do something different because I really like to challenge myself, and I really like a new challenge, and I found flying an interesting thing to find out more about, and I was walking along, I was thinking this could be my next profession. So from theory to practice, I was just quickly going through the how I could become an airline pilot as well, and then moved to Florida, stayed there for a year, came back, and within 2.5 years I was in my first job. So I was just, I mean, if I should come with a good suggestion or some tips to the young players, it's always there will always be something that happens after your footballing career, so it's always good to have something to look forward to apart from only playing football.
Yeah, good advice. Well, for young players coming through it, there you go. There's a man who's taken his career a different way, hugely successful. But let's go on to Celtic and you know what's coming up, Murdo. Final two games of the season. So we've got St Johnstone tomorrow night, and we've got Hibs on Sunday. Like a chance to get 6 points to finish with back-to-back victories. I suppose that's what you could take from it. Will we see a strong Celtic lineup? Will we see some of the young players playing? What do you expect for these last two games?
Well, it's a strange one for the manager, because obviously he's wanting to win the two games. Keep the whole season up a wee bit better than what it's been, but win the two games, because it's two tough games. St Johnstone will be flying just now, Hibs will be flying just now because of their getting to the cup final. But when you're looking at it just now, a lot of people will be saying, "Oh, they just throw in all the kids," but we've not seen kids most of the season. Very few players. Young Welsh came in halfway through the season, but apart from him, there's not been anything coming through. Dembele, I think, got a couple of sub.
I think Dembele's the one everybody wants to see. I mean, playing some part, but
should Dembele not been out on the park a long time ago? Because when he first made his debut, you're going back a couple of years, and he's hardly been in the team since then.
Yeah.
And when he's been on the pitch, he's been great to watch. Good pace. You can score goals, all these kind of things. So, but I don't know. I don't think he'll chop the whole first team and just say, right, yeah, that's it. You're not playing today. Just put in half the younger boys. I just think he'll have a strong side, strong enough to try and beat both of the sides.
Yeah, well, a lot of people call for to see some of these young players. One of the young players is Sorrow, who's come in on numerous occasions and done okay. I would say, I don't expect him to see him tomorrow night because Scott Brown, the skipper, it's going to be his last game at Celtic Park after 14 years. I mean, Murdo, sum up what kind of player, captain, leader he has been for the club, and it'll be an emotional night for him. And it is a shame, is it not, that there's not a crowd there to give him a standing ovation in his last game.
Yeah, the whole thing. Scott Brown. For me, watching Scott Brown as a young player at Hibs, battling away there, and I think he changed slightly from the Hibs way he played, because he used to join into the front line, be kind of play off the main striker, and scored a few goals for Hibs. But when he came to Celtic, he was a sitting midfield player, and he was a battler, and he was the organiser, and he was a leader, and the 14 years have been fantastic.
Yeah.
And I just think he's what he's achieved, because over the years, ever watching a game when he's not in the team, then there's a problem.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can tell that somebody needed a kick up the backside from Scott on the park. But when he was on the park all the time, he pushed and he pushed and he pushed, and he wound people up so much, especially the more experience he had over the last 3 or 4 years. In the early years, he just got on with it, and he was a battler. He was a really good player. But recently, just watching the way he could wind any player up was great to watch.
Yeah, Harold, I mean, Scott has been such an iconic player for Celtic, such a leader in his period there. I mean, your time at the club, you had some big characters in that dressing room, some, big leaders, obviously the captain being Tom Boyd at the time. But how important, will it be for the new Celtic manager to find someone like that? Or do you think he may be already there? Callum McGregor's been muted as possibly being the next captain, but it's important to have a real figurehead at a club like Celtic, is it not?
Yes, it is. I think the importance of having someone that can bring that culture of the club further on, because one thing is the history for the club, which is well known, but you need to carry that on, and you need some players that can be that kind of continuity that you need. And as Murdo rightly says, it's been a good proof of truth that Scott has been at the club for so many years, and he's grown into the role. And I think you mentioned it earlier as well. You have all the youngsters that's coming through, but if they should have any chance to break through, they need some leaders to show them the way. And you also need to have them into a team which is consistently enough to win games, to win all the fights that you need, because that's what build confidence, that's what build good players. And if you don't give them that opportunity, they will not reach their potential. And in that respect, I think the likes of Scott or any other player that is performing well for a club over a period of time, the young players can then look up to those players and see that the hard work really pays off. But you need to put the hard work in, not only for 1 week or 1 month or 1 season. It's going to take years to build that, and that's why I would call Scott. If I would call him a Celtic lighthouse, because he is always the one that you turn to when you lose sight of the direction. So those players are really important.
That's a great saying. I can see the newspapers picking that up. Scott Brown, the Celtic lighthouse. Harold, you've just done Derek's job for him in the newspapers. But listen, Harold, see, when you joined the club in December, I mean, it was obviously a huge time for Celtic. Did you feel that you had strong characters to lean on when times were tough? Leaders like Scott Brown, and I know you've touched on how important that was, but personally, as a player, and especially a foreign player coming to the country, did that help you?
Definitely. I I had my thoughts of how what's going to be, but I didn't really know how important that season was. But coming into Celtic Park, coming into the dressing room, and I must admit that how the things turned out, I wasn't prepared for that, because it was so much more than I was expecting. But then having those strong characters having those strong characters in the team, as you said, Tom Boyd, we had Mark Reaper, we had goalie in goal, we had Craig, we had Paul, we had Henrik. There's so many players that could contribute to what we were doing, and not the least to mention also Wim and Murdo. We cannot forget what a manager and the manager team is doing as well, because I cannot remember one day that we did something different. We did all the same things all through the season. We had some losses, we had some hard fights, but we still did the same thing. And that, I think we need to give obviously all the experienced players credit for that. But I think Wim and Murdo has got too little credit for that, because they were calm enough to continue with the hard work that we did all through the season, and that was really pivotal at the end of the season, because for the last 2-3 weeks we did the same things all the way. We did not change anything, and I think that was the thing that made us win that last game and give the Celtic fans the championship they wanted.
Yeah, Harold, it's funny you should say that Murdo was calm, because 2 minutes before we came on air, we were just chatting about the game, and you said that, everybody was so nervous that day, and you only really watched it about a year ago for the full time, the full 90 minutes. That was
Harold,
the first time.
I watched the game, I think it was maybe a year and a half ago. First time it was on television, and I watched the 90 minutes, because everybody has always, since it happened, always talking about what a great day, fantastic day, but so nerve-wracking and all this kind of thing. And all the fans, I'm talking about all the fans, so nervous. But we were at the side watching the whole thing, and it wasn't until watching the full 90 minutes, Harold, that the amount of misplaced passes from the team and going out the park and giving the ball away, and it just felt this team has never given the ball away in their lives, and now all of a sudden, last game. But we had so much of the play. No, throughout the 90 minutes, and Johnson, I think they had a 1 wee half chance with a header from the striker. But apart from that, but when you've got Harold to come on and just go on and
score. Well, listen, we've got comments. I mean, that game will never be forgotten. But we've got comments coming in for you, Harold. There's Donny Boy then saying, "Hoops, hope all well, Harold. Nice to see you." Another Brown Warrior says, "What a goal! What a title running." So people, quite clearly can't forget it. Harold, I'm glad you mentioned Murdo and Wim there, though, because the last couple of games for the Celtic management team, which is John Kennedy, Steve McManus, and Gavin Strachan, how did they get the players up for essentially meaningless games? How do players react to nothing to play for, or should there be players with something in their mind that the new manager could potentially be watching them in these last 2 games and judging them?
I think as a professional, you should always go out on the pitch and do your best. I know there's obviously all different kind of distractions every time, but I think as a professional, if you can do that, because that's been a good issue. I mean, good issue to talk about the last year, because of the Corona situation, because there have been so many games been played the last year with no spectators, no fans in the stands, and that makes a difference. But that's where you can separate the really professionals from the not so good professionals, because this is your job and you have to play hard for that shirt. And I think that showed through my first period at the club. It was the most important 4 or 5 months of the club in many years. But I think when you have a certain amount of professionality in the club and within the management, but also within the players, that's what you get. You get someone that is so. They made it so important that every game counted, and that's what the present players should think about as well. Just make sure that you do your job, and then it shouldn't matter what kind of manager that comes in, because if you have done the job, he will definitely make no mistake in selecting you.
Yeah. Well, that, I mean, if you're at Celtic, you have to be professional in every game you play in, of course. So it shouldn't be up for question. But Murdo, what do you think of the players? Well, and the management team, coaches, will they just be desperate to get these 2 games out of the way, get away in their holidays, international duty, and start looking forward to the end of June when they'll report for pre-season?
Yeah, it's difficult for the management team just now, because they don't know if they're going to be part of the new management team. You know, Eddie Howe, if he's the man, I don't know, I've got to say. If he's going to bring his backroom staff, there's about 14 or 15 of them in the backroom staff. So,
yeah, there's a few.
So I don't know what's going to happen. So they'll be delighted. John Kennedy will be delighted that he's been the interim manager of Glasgow Celtic. Great for his CV that he's been there, and you know, he was there as a player, and now he's been the manager. But John will be looking to see hopefully he will still be at the club, and if not, if he's moving on, then he can go and get a good job. So that's what will be in John's thoughts, and you would like to think, or he'll be thinking, oh, well, my last couple of games at Celtic, I want to win these games.
Yeah, of course.
So it's always good, because it's good for a player, it's good for the fans, and it's good for the manager as well.
It's good for the old win percentage on the CV, is it not?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
So all these things, all the players as well. I don't know the attitudes, because attitudes have been in and out the whole season, and I think it's very difficult to gauge how they're going to react for their last 2 games.
Yeah, I think even we're touching on Scott Brown, the leader. His last game at Celtic Park for Celtic, he'll want to go out with a win. Yeah. He'll also want to go out and win his last game at Easter Road against his old team. So there's plenty of motivation there. Guys, let's move on a wee bit. Chris Ajer, Harold's fellow countryman, he's been one of the top performers, you've got to say, for Celtic this season. He's attracting interest. We'll bring in Derek McGregor. Derek, how are you doing?
Doing fine, Mark. Thank you. Hello, Harold. Hello, Murdo.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, Derek.
Yeah, listen, Derek, we know a number of clubs want to sign Chris Ajer. Newcastle was the latest one, I think, was watching him at Ibrox a couple of weeks ago. Any update on his situation? Any new news?
I think Newcastle United at the moment, Mark, are front runners for Christopher Ajer's signature. And I think Norwich City also have a very keen interest. I would expect others to emerge during the summer. And I think it's the situation, quite honestly. I think it probably will suit both parties for a kind of parting of the ways in the summer. I think Christopher Ajer's been over the piece for 5 years. It cost £600,000. I think he's been great value for Celtic. He's achieved everything. I think it's probably the right time for Christopher Ajer to go. And also I think it's the right time for Celtic to recoup what kind of fee they can get for him. Yeah.
Well, Harold, I mean, he's came to the club as a young player. He struggled to settle in, but he went out on loan. Of course, he came back. He's played a number of positions, but it looks like he's matured into a top centre-half. How highly do you rate Chris Ajer?
As you say, he's been good for many years, even though he's young. And I think getting back to what Murdo said as well about bringing in a new manager with his whole backroom staff, it's one thing, because you need to convince the manager as well. But I think he has done some parts of what I said. He's just been grinding, working hard, and putting his best effort in all the time, and that pays off. And I think in any team, if you are good enough, then you are old enough, and he has shown that. You don't need to be 28 years old and have lots of experience, because he has been learning so fast that he has gained that experience in a short while, and he has had some qualities that has been within him since he came to Celtic. So I'm not afraid of his future, neither in if he stays or not. But maybe he's moving on. Maybe that's good. But I think for a club like Celtic, it's just a matter of finding those players yet again, because Celtic needs to know that that's the position Celtic has. It's difficult to keep the players for a long time. That happened with Virgil van Dijk. It's going to happen with probably Chris Ajer again. But I think if that's part of the plan for Celtic, I'm not worried. Not either for Celtic, and definitely not for Chris either.
Yeah, Murdo, I mean, just to balance things out, because people obviously have different opinions. Stevie Dock here says Ajer has flattered to deceive. Watched first 6 months of the season and he was as bad as the rest of them, was to blame for most goals. He's very poor defensively. He would get shown up in a bigger league. Obviously, Stevie Dock doesn't think he's worth the move, but has he suffered because the guys round about him have been questionable at times? I mean, you know what it's like to have a partner beside you who you can trust and rely on, and you know each other's movements. Quite often the case, things have been moved about in that Celtic back four. Do you think Ajer suffered because of that? Because for me, there's no doubt he's an outstanding player with great attributes who could make it in a better league.
I think he's been part of it as well. It's not. I think I'm not saying 100% that I'd say that's the way he's played. When you watch Ajer playing, he does so many good things, but he does a lot of poor things defensively. No, he's a centre half. When you're a centre half and you're 6'4" and the ball's coming into the box, you've got to go and attack the ball. You've got to go and I think he let himself down with that. But because any time you talk about Ajer, everybody always talks about when he picks the ball up and he runs into the middle of the park and then he goes into the final third of the park and saying, wow, look at this is great. So, but he's a centre half, and he's been part of letting in a lot of goals this season.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that he's got to, just what you touched on there, having another centre half with experience beside him to talk him through games, where he should be going, because the amount of times he's running out of the where the danger is, and then all of a sudden the opposition, because that's happened all season, so many teams have scored so many soft goals against Celtic, and see when you've got two big centre halves, which Celtic's got, they've got big centre halves, and they've not been defending as well, and the goalie. And the goalkeepers. So
a lot of people here, a lot of comments coming in, and Brian Murphy's just one. Ajer looks like a number 6 defensive mid, would do a good job, not a centre half. There was another one, Grant Liddell. Ajer would be better playing in Brown's position, and there's a number of them coming in. I mean, Derek, what do you actually think his best position is? Because he started out as centre midfielder, he's dropped back. Could he fill in that centre midfield role?
Yeah, I think he could, Mark. I mean, I think in last week's derby at Ibrox, we saw both the best and the worst of Christopher Ajer. There's a lot of times in his Celtic career that when he's charging up the park, going past man after man, it always reminds me of what Roy Aitken used to be like. And I know that's quite a comparison to make, but just the style of Ajer charging up the park with the ball. There was a moment at Ibrox last week that he probably should have scored one of the goals of the season, where he's jinked past 3 or 4 players, he gets into the box, and then he's just lacked that kind of clinical touch. But then, clearly, I think with the Morelos goal, he's been slated because he's maybe not showed enough bravery to come out and maybe charge at Morelos to try and block the shot. He's kind of turned his back on it. He received a lot of criticism for that. But, you know, I think there's so many good elements to his game. I think he's composed. I think essentially he's good in the ball. He maybe does lack a bit of aggression as a centre half. You'd maybe like to see a bit more of that in him. In terms of centre midfield, I think he could if he was given a prolonged run. I mean, I think Harold will be able to tell us that central midfield is where he started his career.
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure, but I would like to add something on that, because there's obviously so many questions here now and so few answers at the moment with Chris, it seems to be. But I would say that you would never be able to judge him on a different level if he doesn't try it. So I think there's always critics that will say that he's good enough. He's not good enough, but he needs to try that on a different level before we can say that he's not good enough. And I think sometimes you are just part of the rest of the team, and you cannot do anything on your own unless you are the top world players. And most of the players, even in international football today, are not. So they are depending on their own team. So I would like to see him at a different level before I would judge him, because he that would tell us if he is a quick learner or not.
Yeah, Martin Bickett here just says, with a good coach and team, he will excel. Derek, on you go, Derek. What were you going to add there?
Sorry, no, I was just going to say that I think he's possibly at that stage of his development as a player that I think he probably needs to move on. Celtic hold the cards. He's still got a year of his contract to go, but I think he's at that stage.
So what will happen, Derek? Do you think he'll be out here in the summer, or do you think he will?
Yeah,
he will run down his contract. Yeah, he'll definitely be away. Yeah.
My full expectation, Mark, is he will go, and I think that will be primarily because he will say to the club that it's his desire to leave, and I think Celtic have to learn the lessons from last summer when, while their intentions were good to keep all their best players, there were clearly a number of them that wanted to go, and I think at any club, if a player makes it clear he wants to go, I think it's hard for a club to ignore that, really.
If I can add something as well, because it's important to know that as a club that players will leave at some point, unless you have someone like Scott Brown, and they don't. I mean, Scott Browns, they don't grow on trees because it's difficult to find those, and I think it's important for the club to have a permanent, good, long-term plan for what you're going to do with your present players, but also with existing young players. Are you going to fit them into the first team one by one, little by little, so they'll take the next step as well as Chris has done? I think that's important as well, because if the club has a good player management plan to guide from, then it would be easier also to sell players like Chris, knowing for certain that you will at some point find new Chris Ajers or new Scott Browns somewhere down the line.
Yeah, it's a good point, Harold. And lots of the Celtic fans, I think that's a problem. There doesn't seem to be a sure plan going forward. Maybe there is, and they're just not unveiling it just now. But guys, move on to our next point, which is our poll results. We put out, will Celtic bounce back next season? But before we get to the results, we can reveal, we said a bit of Odsonne Edouard transfer news, can reveal he's also a target for Aston Villa. That's came to light now, so that adds to the interest from other clubs down south, mainly Leicester. But Derek, what's the situation on that one? Aston Villa a realistic option for Edouard?
I think Aston Villa are a tremendous club. I think they've got a good coaching staff, and clearly that's things that will factor into Edouard's final decision. I think the strong expectation, obviously, is that he will go to Leicester City and be reunited with Brendan Rodgers. I think it's a little premature to say that a deal is signed and sealed. That I don't believe that to be the case. But like Ajer, I think there's every expectation he will go in the summer. I think, again, because he also wants to go. I think he wanted to go last summer. There's not going to be any shortage of suitors for Edouard, but there's going to be a number of elements that he will make his final decision. Obviously, money will come into it. I think he's at such a stage in his career that he's a top prospect and he'll know his own value. But I think he'll want to know the coaching staff and clearly the ambitions. We expect him to go to Leicester City, but it's one of those players I think that might tempt another club to come in at the 11th hour that may surprise people.
Yeah, well, I said last week, the more clubs interested, the better for Celtic. It drives up the cost. Harold, interesting to hear what you think. Obviously, you're a man that carried the burden of being Celtic's number 9, and you know what comes with that position better than we do. What do you make of Odsonne Edouard as a player?
I agree with Derek. He's showed his talent for everyone. So I would put him in the same category as Chris. And again, going back to the club, if the club has a good player management plan, that would not be a problem, because Edouard is just such a good player. He would fit into a higher level as well, because we have to admit that the Scottish Premier League is a little bit behind the English Premier League. So it's hard for someone to take the next step if you're not playing with those good teams all the time. But he's definitely one of those who can take the next step as well. But again, I'm not, as long as Celtic have a good plan, I'm not afraid of what's going to happen, because I think Celtic should live off that plan to create good new players by continually developing young, good talents into fully grown players that can be some kind of a financial plan for the club as well, because that's what's important now. You need to have a financial plan with your players to see what you can get out from them.
Yeah, okay, so on our poll result, like I was just chatting about there, we put out, can Celtic bounce back next season? People divided on it, but the Celtic fans have voted yes. 67% say they can bounce back. No, 33%. Murdo, your view on that? Have Celtic left it too late in their appointment of a manager and full coaching team, or can they get this right and bounce back?
Well, that's the thing. But every Celtic fan, I'm saying every, but you always feel that you're going to have a real go this time. No, yeah, that's your mentality when you're playing at Celtic. Let's go. We can win this again. We can win the title. And obviously, the biggest problem is when your top players just now, towards the end of the season, they've all been tipped to go down south. And then you start looking about who else is going to leave this club, and then who's going to be brought into this club. Mm-hmm. So when you start bringing in the new players, and again, it's just the new manager, whoever comes in as new manager, and he's picking some of the top players from other clubs. That's what you need, because it's no use just bringing in players and it doesn't work for them.
Yeah. Well,
but the Celtic fans will know in a short space of time, get into the start of next season, because you can never judge players by how much you had to pay for them.
It's all about their performance on the pitch.
Their performance on the pitch.
And the thing is, these players that come in will get judged pretty quickly. But there's an awful lot of variables there, Harold. I mean, because we don't actually know what will happen, who will be brought in, who the actual manager is going to be. But apart from blind faith, but I mean, the Celtic hierarchy know they've got a job in their hands to get this Celtic team back up to scratch. Do you believe that can be done in such a short space of time? I think the Champions League qualifiers are maybe 10 weeks away, so they've got that to contend with, as well as the start of the season. Can that much amount of work be done in such a short space of time?
It's going to be hard, but it's possible if you find the right person. But also, you need to. It's important what Murdo says, because it doesn't matter how much you pay for a guy or how much he his wages. I mean, what he earns. It doesn't make any sense if he doesn't perform. And I think you need to find also the manager that needs to know what buttons to push to get that team into a good enough shape until the qualifier starts. And there's no point in waiting for next game, or waiting for the next season, or waiting for the next away game, or waiting for the next qualifier, because that's always going to be the case. There's always new games. And I think now the next important game is those qualifiers. And the club needs to make sure that whoever they bring in has a plan to get the team into shape and fit into his plan in a short period of time. It's tough, but it's doable, I think.
Yeah, it is going to be tough. And of course, listen, fans might be back in the stadiums, which might make a huge difference to Celtic success. We hope so. Talking about fans getting back in the stadium, just to digress, First Star is back in the road, Murdo. They're doing live Q&A events, and they're appearing with Chris Sutton. And I'll be on the undercard with Chris Sutton at M&D's Strathclyde Park on October the 7th, so tickets are available, and more big names will be announced coming soon. This is my first venture into this. Won't I let myself in for Murdo? You enjoy these gigs, don't you?
Great fun.
And great for socialising and meeting the supporters.
It's great supporters coming, and they're up close to the players, they're heroes, and then they can ask questions.
Yeah,
and it's great questions and great answers from the boys, and it's a super night.
Yeah,
it's really good. So
but I was more going down the angle. You can see the ones that heckle you and give you the abuse rather than no like that.
It's like a football park. If you're doing all right, they'll get behind you.
Will they?
So that's all you
Well,
need
but
to do.
Harold, would you? I mean, you like to be part of that, coming and meeting the Celtic fans one day and having a Q&A, because that's people have missed that interaction. But as I say, first start, now things are getting back to normal. Hopefully, fans back in the stadiums, but then they can get out to some of these events and meet some of the guys.
Oh, definitely. I would love to come. And in that respect, I could come because the laugh could be on me because I don't understand the language anyway. So that would be good fun.
No, listen, I'm looking forward to so listen, tickets will be on sale, and like I said, there'll be other events with other big names coming throughout the year. So let's finish off, guys, with what we always finish off with every week for the past 10 weeks, the new manager. Still not here yet. And Derek, I've got to ask, will Eddie Howe eventually come to Celtic? Should the Celtic fans be worried that nothing has moved on? The statement from the club was put out, didn't really say a lot this week, understood the fans' frustration, but didn't really tell them much that we didn't know already.
Mark, I think the way it's going, Murdo could yet come back into the frame for a sensational return. And they could do a lot worse, Mark. They could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
No, I do have a sense that this is coming to a conclusion, and I do.
When though?
I do. No, I do very much.
This week.
Believe that Eddie Howe will be the manager. Yeah, I think
by this week. By the time we come on air next week, will we have Eddie Howe as manager?
I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance of an announcement, a confirmation, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I think there's a chance.
Okay.
I do.
All right. We'll take. Yeah, we'll take. Paul Eady says if it is Howe that's coming in, he would have been working on plans for weeks and targets coming in, and the players that he wants to keep, he won't be going in blind. Well, I mean, that's one way of looking at it, that he's doing his homework behind the scenes.
I felt that for Eddie, if he's been tied up with Celtic for the last 6 or 7 weeks, and he's been using his knowledge to go round it in England to pick out players that's going to be available for Celtic to do so, because obviously so many people will be saying to the new manager before he even comes to Celtic, this one's not going to be here and this one's not going to be here. They're all going, so we'll get money for them, but you've got to go and get a new centre back, you've got to get a new centre forward, you've got to bring in better quality than what we've got just now. So every day will be giving the new manager some details on who to get rid of.
I suppose it's an interesting point to look at if he is coming in, like Murdo says, if he has been in talks with Celtic for 6 to 7 weeks and he knows he's coming, maybe he did prefer to stay in the background. If he took the job and he was in the dugout for, say, the Rangers game last week, you obviously get the pressure of trying to win a football game. Whether he could just be sitting back, analysing players like you say, concentrating on the future rather than an instant reaction just now, which is another way of looking at it. Harold, I mean, more than 10 weeks since Neil Lennon left Celtic. What's your thinking about the full managerial situation? Has it taken too long, or are the Celtic hierarchy doing the right thing by waiting and then possibly announcing, like Derek says, after the last game of the season?
Well, if they announce the next manager soon and it's known that they have been working on it for a while, then it's a good move. But if they still don't have any good plans for how the next manager will look like, at the moment they're lagging behind. But I have belief in the Celtic boardroom and also the management that they know what to do next. And I think it's also important to give the next guy some time, not too much, but some time, because we all know that the start of the season will be important, but he also needs a little bit of time to get the team together. But if all things fail, I mean, me and Murdo can be the caretakers for the next months.
Yeah, some of the Celtic fans would like to see that. But I think you make an important point there, Harold, for whoever's coming in. Yeah. I get that instant success is required the majority of the time at Celtic, but there's such a rebuilding job to do at the club, not just on the pitch but behind the scenes, that he's got to be given some leeway, I reckon, when he comes in.
You're talking about the leeway and all that kind of thing. I think we brought in 10 players for that season to stop 10 in a row, so that and most of the 10 played all the time. Do you know what I mean? They're always in the squad the whole time.
Yeah.
So just lets you know that you can get a lot of new faces in and they can gel.
And it could gel.
But Harold touched on it earlier on. Football players, they've got to make sure when they're on the pitch that they give 100% and work for their team.
Yeah,
that's so important, and that's what happened with Stockton 10 in a row. They all fought for each other. There was a great attitude in the dressing room. Yeah.
Well, listen, just quickly, guys, before we go and we wrap it up, I just wanted to bring up the wee point, because it relates to what Harold's saying about the vision, the long-term vision and developing young players. But the Celtic and Rangers Colts, it went to the Lowland League. They voted it in. I believe, Derek, does it have to go to an AGM next week? But is it a good thing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm for it. And I think the AGM, the feeling is that the AGM, it's a formality that will rubber stamp the vote of the clubs. I'm for it. I think it's imaginative. I can understand the concerns of the other clubs concerned, but I think there's a clear financial benefit to those clubs. It's for 1 year. I don't think there's any harm in seeing how the season goes, but I think it's imaginative and I think it's bold.
Yeah, Murdo, and for young players who we're chatting about, maybe we'll see some young players at the tail end of the season in these games, and we're racking our brains who has really had a lot of football under their belt. They haven't, because of this whole pandemic. But this makes sense, does it not? It gives these young players some actual experience on a Saturday 3 o'clock match day experience, because Celtic will surely get the benefit the following season from these young players.
The good thing as well, for all the amount of fans that will turn up down the leagues, it'll be really good for the fans turning up and supporting, and the money for the other clubs. They'll be making some money out of it. So it's a big positive step forward. And when you've got clubs like Celtic and Rangers turning up, it's the whole town, whatever town the clubs are, they get excited for it. They're desperate to see them coming. So all the local fans will start turning up, and watching the teams play. Yeah,
it's much better for their development. So I'm with you guys. I think it's a positive thing, and hopefully Celtic see the benefits in the seasons to come. Guys, that's us. Harold, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And if you're ever flying past here and touching down in Scotland, you can come along to one of these Q&As and have a good night with the supporters. Thanks very much, mate, for joining us.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back to Scotland pretty soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. And Derek, once again, thanks very much for joining us. Speak to you again maybe next week. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers. Murdo, that was a good one. So, quick prediction. You think they'll go full strength the last 2 games of the season, enough to win both games, 6 points?
Yeah.
Finish on
because
a sort of high?
I'm looking at both of them, thinking about their cup final. And maybe if there are 1 or 2 players who maybe think, need to be careful here and all this kind of thing. But I'm not talking about Celtic. I'm
talking about St Johnstone and Hibs.
Both and looking at towards the cup final. So I still think Celtic will win both games.
6 points out of 6. Let Scott Brown leave on some little high. That's us. Thanks again to Murdo, to Harold and to Derek, and thanks to everyone for listening, getting in their comments, and once again thanks to our sponsors, First Star Legends Gin, Social Recluse and First Class Transfers. We'll see you all again next week.